Hi, I'm Charles. Welcome to the Church in Action podcast. We know that when the people of God do the work of God, people want to know Jesus, and that transforms lives, New England, and the world. So we talk about the ingredients that makes that happen. Disciples who do justice and share Jesus. All of that to accelerate evangelism. And today we're actually going to be covering all three of those topics in one way, shape, or form or another. We've got a special guest back with us today. Pastor Sergio Perez is the senior pastor at Harvest Ministries of New England. He's the founder of Kopani, which is the Fellowship of Hispanic Pastors of New England, or as I like to try and do from my schooling days, the Confraternidad de Pastores Hispanos de Nueva Inglaterra. He's also the chairman of the board of Vision New England. Sergio, thanks for being with us again.
Thank you, Charles. It's a blessing to share with all of our audience, our viewers. I don't know how to call them: audience, viewers, YouTubers, Spotifyers. already had a hard time learning English, but these new terms, man, they keep adding.
Thanks. And we're going to talk about some things that are English and Spanish today. So feel free to drop back and forth at your leisure. I just want to understand some of it. For folks who maybe missed last time when you were here, Sergio, can you just kind of refresh people on your story and Harvest Ministries and Kopani, what they are, what they do?
Thank you. Well, grew up in a Christian home in Guatemala. Decided to come to the States because I wanted to get away from that Christian environment. I wanted to try to find my freedom. But thank God, by being here by myself, I had that re-encounter with the Lord, which really transformed my life. Since then, I felt the calling of God to plant a church, but it took me to a few years of discipleship and training, and then it came back in 1989 to. It wasn't actually like planted. There were a few families that were ready to, start a church. And so I came in 1989. I started working with these families. The same year I got married. Same year I got here. So everything happened in 1989. So that's been 32 years. And it's been wonderful. I remember telling the church when I first got here, I was 24. And there were, mostly young people. And I said, look, this is my first experience as a pastor. So you're going to have the privilege of seeing my blessings, good decisions, my mistakes. So whoever wants to learn about ministry, I'm going to serve you as an example. So 32 years ago that I started working with, the church, Harvest Ministries. And then after working very passionate about, the church, the ministry, I felt this sort of emptiness that I wasn't whole, I wasn't complete. I needed something else. And then I realized that I was blessed with a wonderful family, beautiful ministry, but still I feel like incomplete. And I began to ask God, what was it? And then what I found out was that I needed to work with the body of Christ and not just to focus on my ministry. So my first area of expansion was to become friends with pastors, Latino pastors. That began in 1996. Just having a relationship with other pastors, and then in 2000, along with Dr. Roberto Miranda, actually 2001, we founded Kopani, the Hispanic Pastoral Fellowship of New England. For 10 years, Dr. Miranda was leading us. And then from 2011 to now, I became the president of Kopani.
And Sergio, what does Kopani do? Is it about fellowship? Do you guys do initiatives together, or is it more of a unity movement? How do you think about
it? It started as a fellowship because we understood that was the foundation. But and then we started working, seeing the needs of the church. But I would say that that about probably 10 years ago was that we decided to define some areas that we wanted to focus on, knowing that We always going to be surrounded by so many needs. There always are many needs, but at least if we can focus on 4 different areas, I think that would be a good starting point. And so we decided to focus on evangelism, everything that has to do with evangelism, with leadership, with immigration, which it turned into biblical justice, and then the next generation, youth. So, we've been focusing on those 4 areas. That means that everything that we do, like our meetings, retreats, events, we always trying to cover some of those areas of work.
Yeah, and I always love your story, and that you're Jonah running from God, right, and going overseas to do it, right. So there's a little bit of need, but of course God follows you, and in His grace, just like the rest of us, chases you down.
It is so true, so true. I got to a point I wanted to experience the world so much that when I was away from God, I say like, no way, I'm going back to church. The only 3 possible ways that I could go back to church and to God is either that I'm very old, that I'm in prison, or I'm in the hospital dying. That's the only way, the only 2 ways that I see myself going back. And thank God it wasn't like that. Really, thank God that when I was 21, I had that encounter with Him, and I was able to surrender my life to Him. And since then, it's been such an adventurous journey.
Yeah, it's the number of times one of our friends or folks we know say the same thing as I said, I was never going to do this, and of course that's where God, right? Larry Ward has shared before. Both he and his wife Virginia said we're never going into pastoral ministry. Like that was our deal. We decided to get married. We're not going to, and of course they're both in pastoral ministry, and right. So I always caution my family: don't tell God what you're not going to do.
I know.
That's the part that puts you right on your radar screen. Then
that's right.
And then you really with Pastor Miranda, you guys really built Kopani. But I love that you started out as really it was about just being together in unity. And so there's something that I've just been focused on the last year, and I think we've shared this before. Is you've got this, John 17, Jesus prays that if the church basically, as we're talking about as followers, if the church will be one like you and I are one, like God and I are one, then people will know God sent His Son. So there's very much an evangelistic aspect about just having unity. And I think there might be a witness piece of it, but I wonder if there's something that's maybe a little bit of mystery in it, that there's a power there that we can't touch or feel. Does that?
Yes, I remember. I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but Francis Frangipani, I think it was. He wrote a book in the 1980s when it was a lot going on regarding spiritual warfare and all this stuff. And I remember he wrote a book called something like that, The 3 Fields of the Spiritual Warfare, something like that. And when I read, some of the chapters, something impacted me so much. And he said this. He said, "Who would have thought?" And he's talking to parents. He said, "Who would have thought that by you going to the baseball game with your son, you are winning the battle, the spiritual battle, the spiritual fight?" And what he meant by that is that when you are together with someone, yes, you can be praying, you can be rebuking demons, you can do, but when you are close to your children, when you're spending time with them, that has such a valuable, it's so valuable, it's a precious time that in itself you're doing spiritual warfare. So the same thing. And this is the idea when God sent me to become friends with leaders here in the region, is if I spend some time eating lunch with someone and I become friend, automatically the level of spirituality is going to rise, because I'm not going to talk back about that person that I just spent some time with them. I'm going to be, I want to be concerned if something is going on with him. I would love him. And we've seen that through the years, really. Even with Dr. Roberto Miranda, we've seen that with so many other pastors. Like about an hour ago, we had a prayer meeting, with pastors, and it's just wonderful just to share with them, to hear their experiences, their struggles. Sometimes we just, open to hear struggles and pray one another. Sometimes I have pastors saying, I don't feel like preaching this time. Could you come over and cover me? Imagine what is going on.
Yeah.
Or having, even issues among, couples. And I'm talking about pastors and saying like, so can we go and talk to you? Imagine where would they go if they wouldn't have that friendship and that trust that has been, cultivated throughout the years. So, at the beginning, you don't see the whole picture, but after, a while, you begin to see the results and the benefits of laying down that friendship foundation.
Yeah, we were on Tuesday mornings. We have a call with the Black Ministerial Alliance, and that was the topic we were talking about this morning. Is pastors need a safe place to be able to talk about these things because they are impacted by the mental health issues that have been going on. There's an explosion of mental health around the country. We just had a meeting 2 weeks ago with our association directors, and that was one of the key themes about it. Pastors are tired, they're exhausted, even where things are going great. They're tired, they're exhausted. They're in some cases hurt by people in their congregations, that marital difficulties, mental health issues. Pastors are dealing with this, and a lot of pastors don't have a place where I can come to you and have that conversation, Sergio, and share and get counsel or wisdom or anything. And so there's a real struggle there, and so that providing that safe space is so critical.
Right, and it doesn't have to be. Topics doesn't have to be about, always about the Bible. It's like, I remember my son, I remember that I invited a friend of mine, to preach. And then we went out with our family and said, my son, he overheard our conversation. He was like, do you always have to talk about the Bible? But it's the truth, sometimes it doesn't have to be that. I mean, even to go play bowling or play, really it's a lot to gain from that relationship.
Yeah.
And I remember a pastor once preached, an Argentinian pastor. He said, the problem what we have when we see pastors, falling into sin and experiences like that is that we always just focus on the anointing. We didn't focus on the person, but we just focus on the anointing. And it's so true. The anointing is so huge that sometimes it can overshadow our personal issues.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to know the person. And then, yes, you are blessed by the gift, and the anointing that God has put on the person. But, I think it's important to really relate, as a persons with pastors.
Yeah, and Gordon MacDonald has spoken on this a couple of times about just that isolation is a dangerous place for pastors to be too. Is that we run into conflicts and there's not someone there willing to hold us accountable because they know us well enough and we trust them when they say it to us. And so that isolation is a dangerous place for anybody to be, but pastors in particular.
Yeah. Plus the learning process, because definitely God, when He created, I would say the whole world and families, but even when it comes to leadership, God didn't create the gospel to live it by ourselves. It doesn't work that way. And the same is true when we learn. Sometimes I'm reading some books and something, and I read and I say like, wow, this is so beautiful. Why God didn't give it to me directly? No, because He wanted me to be humble, enough to go and say, wow, I'm learning from somebody else. I'm learning from somebody else. And that keeps me humble that other people have great ideas too,
Right?
Not just me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm like, why is Tim Keller so much smarter than I am? Right.
What I learned, and I learned from this from my pastor. He's been my mentor for almost 35 years. And I actually, in a couple of weeks, I'll be with him in San Francisco. And he once told me, look, Sergio, we always need to have 3 persons around us. One, a mentor. always having a mentor, always having someone that we are teaching, a disciple, and a friend. We always need those three persons, you know, someone that we learn from, someone that we can teach what we've been learning, and a friend, someone that we can just hang out with and tell them, look, man, this is how I feel right now. Please help me, pray for me, or let's just let's go out, or let's do something together. I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. Let's shift a little bit, because there was an article in the Atlantic, I think it was back in July, that had a bunch of things to say about what's going on in Latino churches. And I wanted to just get your thinking and insights into it to help us understand it better, because they were making the point that within evangelicalism, whether folks will use that term, and we mean it theologically, not politically, of course, but there are many people who wouldn't like that term applied to them, but still would be evangelicals theologically. And so I want to be careful on that. But so when we're using it, we're talking about a theological term, not a political term. And so with the Latinos are the fastest growing group of evangelicals in the United States. And they go to church more frequently than their Anglo counterparts, or their non-evangelical counterparts or Catholic counterparts. They go to church more, they pray more, they read the Bible more. And that's the fastest growing group. And so, Sergio, is that your experience? And why are Latinos more disciplined? I'm not sure what the right word is about going to church and praying and reading their Bible.
Wow. Probably I could express it a little bit by sharing with you and with our audience this that I heard. I visited Argentina in the midst of the great revival that they experienced in the 1980s and 90s. I went to churches back then that they had 7 or 8 services the same Sunday, 7, 8 services with 2,000-3,000 each, 4,000, each, depending the capacity. Churches were growing, and so we went because we wanted to find out, what's going on. And when they interviewed this pastor, and they say, "What do you attribute, revival in Argentina?" And I remember at least this person responding, "Look, when you have hundreds and thousands of young people disappearing from the streets, you can only depend on God." And I don't know if you remember back then there was, a lot of conflict, internal conflict, in Argentine society, and a lot of youth that were really disappearing, and the government has, it was abusing, families and people who didn't agree with, the government. They would just take care of them, and so they say, like, we were forced to seek for God, we were desperate for God to do something about it. And I heard someone this week saying, one of the things that has blessed us as Latinos, and this person put it this way, is the beauty of poverty, is what is behind lacking things, scarcity. I think somehow God has used those needs to have an encounter with Him where you want to give your life totally to the Lord. I think God has used that element, those needs. We in Guatemala, we experienced 30 years of internal conflict, the guerrillas, with the government, and a lot of people were killed. In El Salvador was the same thing. Nicaragua, I think was some of the most peaceful country probably was Costa Rica, but then Central America, and then South America, a lot of struggles, a lot of needs. And somehow I think God has used that to, get us close to Him, and with that, experiencing Him in such a way that when we come to America, I love what a friend of mine, a pastor, he made a study. He participated in a study that it was done throughout the whole nation, and part of the research was, what was like what is like the best contribution of the Latino Church, into Christianity here in America. And I love what he said. He said, yes, we are known for the tacos and the enchiladas and the pupusas and the tamales, but look, we're more than that. It's really our spirituality. It's just the passion that we have experienced for God. That is probably is like our best contribution, to Christianity here in America.
So physical poverty brings on a spiritual richness. Physical richness brings on a spiritual poverty.
Well, I think that if we are not aware of what we have available in the gospel, yes, I think that you can get very comfortable to the point where, yeah, you don't need God anymore. When you are in need, you need God, but once you reach, some stability and you have everything figured out, um, then you can forget that. That's what I love about the Apostle Paul in Philippians, I think chapter 4, when he's addressing, he said, like, and this is very important, I have learned to live, in need, but also I've learned to have everything. And my pastor told me this. He said, like, Sergio, I think we are good at teaching our people to live in the midst of, necessity and need, but let us also help them to live in prosperity. And so let's be intentional on also, teaching them that what is always first, uh, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. So I think that's also very important, for us to teach our people, especially, among Latinos. I think we have that challenge of let's not forget that. Let's not forget God. Let's not forget where we come from, and why we are here.
Yeah, because there is, it's not to say wealthy people can't be saved, obviously, right?
That's
Because the
right.
apostles ask who then can be saved, and with God
That's
all
right.
things are possible is the answer. But there does seem to be something, and we see it sometimes. We think about medical care, right? We don't pray for miracles in the U.S. as much, and it's partly because we don't need miracles as much because we've got all of this medical technology. But then we can forget that God is still behind the healing,
That's
and
right.
by the way, we miss out on the miracles on sometimes, right?
That's right.
The
That's
same
right.
thing can happen with material wealth.
That's
And
right.
and so I read that Sam Rodriguez, I know a friend of yours who leads the National Hispanic Leadership Christian Leadership Council. He's talking about the amount of Latino church plants that are planned,
Mm.
and the NHCLC is planning. They've got 40,000 churches that are members, but they're planning 25,000 church plants over the next this 2020, so 9 years, right? That's like eight plants a day. And one of the things they talk about in the article is that Latino churches now are coming us alongside majority white churches saying, you need us, right? We can help you to plant it. So we think about the white churches helping Latino churches. He's saying, no, the model's being flipped altogether.
Mm.
You need us. And are you seeing that in Massachusetts, New England, or nationally? Are you seeing that start to play out that way? And how are white churches responding to it?
Right. Well, what I've seen is, like, even in my own experience here with Kopani and our pastors, is that there is some elements that God has been using that have turned into, such a great blessing. Like, for instance, home groups. Um, I have one of our pastors. He's part of Kopani, and I think he had planted probably some 7 churches. The headquarters are in Marlboro, Centro Cristiano Emmanuel Christian Center, and most of the churches are very successful. They're growing. They're growing. I mean, I'm talking about, like, like daughter churches that they have 700, 1,000 members, in their congregation. And but the way that they have done it is that since they work with the home groups, small groups, once they have a number of groups in certain cities, and distance might could become an issue. So it is easy for them to turn those home groups into a new church. They plant churches. So in that sense, the transition from home groups to planting a church is very smooth. They're already like it's like they're already doing it. And I think that has been part of the blessing, of working with this systems of work. And so I do see that even English speaking churches, they're serving the community, they're doing a good job at the community, and then they see small groups of Latinos coming to the church, and some of them they continue working, but I know a few churches that then they think of, why don't we hire a Latino pastors to take care of that, and from them sometimes they stay there, sometimes they just plant another church, but that's a way that churches have been growing. And I think one of the blessings is that we are still experiencing that among leaders, Latino pastors are like 80% of them are first generation with Latinos.
Mm.
So those who feels better still speaking Spanish, so they have a lot of churches versus the Catholic churches that only like 10% of the leadership speak Spanish, or the Latinos.
Mm.
So I think we are more available in that sense.
Yeah. And so when you talk about these home groups, what does a typical home group look like? Is it like an at-home Bible study of a few couples, or is it something else? How should we understand that term?
Wow, that's a beautiful question, because, like, for instance, even in my case, in my experience working with home groups for so many years, at the beginning they were like discipleships. It was the concept was, okay, why don't we move the Sunday school service to one of the weekdays, and then bring the concept of teaching. So for a few years, I think we managed home groups towards discipleship. But then learning from other ministries is like, hey, home groups could be a very strategic place to bring friends that they don't feel comfortable going to church. And the idea is this: the idea is like, the work that paramedics do, ambulances. They go where the need is. They don't tell the injured, hey, come, we're gonna fix you. It's like they go to where the people have been in an accident.
Yeah.
So instead of like always telling people, come to church, why don't we go to them? And we don't have to invite them to church. We can invite them into a more, casual environment, where we can have a different atmosphere. You're not just listening, but you are participating, and you have a snack, and you have, in a very casual setting. And that thing, I think that has been very appealing to many people, you know.
And is there a cultural thing there though, where it's that it's more common in the Latino community where you would invite me to your home and I would say yes, even if it was for a church thing? Or do you not think that cultural stuff plays into it necessarily, and it's more proximity?
I think it's proximity, because now, I mean, we see churches that they work with small groups. Many churches like Saddleback, and Church of the Highlands, and many churches, growing churches. They've been working with some type of small groups, and so the idea is that at the beginning we started with you know that need of teaching people, but then we decided that yes, our home groups could be also a good tool for evangelism, and at the same time to take care of those souls that have been accepting Jesus. So it has turned into a tool to shepherd the people, but also, I mean, to evangelize, but also to take care of them, at that setting, at that level where we may not know the need, but just for you to have an idea, right now is hard to keep up with the statistics because of the how change have how things has changed. But before the pandemic, I remember looking at my weekly report, and we had like an average of like 150 visits per week. I mean,
new visitors.
No, that we visited.
You visited.
Our leaders or our members visited to someone. So imagine how am I going to visit 150 people, but through the leadership and through the members of the home groups, we plan. Every home groups plan to visit. Certain homes. Some visitors are just to take care of people. Sometimes to pray for someone. Sometimes because there is a need. So uh, being in those neighborhoods, with the home groups, I think has become a huge blessing because it's a way to step into those needs.
That's interesting. So that might be a learning for some of us too, because I'm me, I'm a corporate guy, and I'm big on what you measure is what you get. You measure the wrong things, you get the wrong behavior, right? But you measure the right things, you get the right behavior. I've never heard a pastor talk about measuring how many people we visited. We measure how many people come in. I wonder if it's just I haven't heard it, or if that's something that is unique to you or Latino churches to measure visiting. That's interesting.
Right. Well, there have been like 3 different models that we have learned from. In my case, it's been like 3 different models, and I think that whatever the model is, there are like some common, practices, and I think having that report of how many people come into Christ, making a decision, and then how many people are being visited. I think that's part of of the whole system.
Now, one thing in the Atlantic article they talked about is it costs about a third of the cost to plant a Latino church than it does to plant an Anglo church. And so is it that home group model that makes it so much less expensive, or is it more bivocational pastors, or any insight into why? Because I look at it, and again, I put my corporate hat on. If I can get 3 Latino churches for the price of 1 Anglo church, guess what I'm doing? Right? I may not be smart, but I'm not stupid.
That's right. Well, very interesting. I think that my wife would say something like, "We are a very low maintenance, people."
Meaning what though? How's that meaning? Just lower standard of living, right?
I think part of that. I think it's part of that. And to be honest, Charles, look, I have such a great admiration for so many years. I put it this way. I was an American that was born in Guatemala. I feel like I was going here, but then got to be like, no, you're going to go to Guatemala. It's just so many things that I admire, really. What so many people, reject, and they're confused about it. I mean, I have such a great admiration, really, for the things that I have learned from the core values of Americans, especially missionaries. Like, for instance, sometimes they call us missionaries back to America, and in a way it's true, but look, you cannot compare the lifestyle that we had back in our countries, and when we come to America, that is like a like Canaan for so many people, the promised land. And then yes, we do some sacrifices, but look, the first missionaries that went to Guatemala, that went to Central America, to Mexico, to South America, where like the first thing that they experienced was disease, sickness. I mean, they didn't have back in those countries, what they had here, all the blessings, So that's something that I have always admired, you know. So when we come and we, join churches, many of our leaders, they have joined churches. There's a need to plant churches. I think that aspect of be vocational, I think that has played, a very important role. Very handy people. We don't know how to, especially for so many countries, we don't like to depend on the government. I mean, we have to work. We need to work. We do whatever it takes to bring, bread on our tables, and very handy to the point that because of how handy they are, they're able to plant churches and then continue working. I mean, having the flexibility of almost dividing their time. And I think that has also played a very important role on being a low cost way of, planting new churches. Plus, home groups is also in people, churches who work with home groups. I think that has also been a very important element because, you don't rent a place until you have, 60 families, for instance, or at least, 60 people, like, 8, 10 families probably. And so you already have some foundation that can help, to support this new ministry. And that's what I've seen even among my, pastors' friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I do wonder if, just like in the pandemic, so many things are changing, if the economics of that starts to change, because that building is an expensive asset if it sits empty during the week. And so since a lot of pastors think about how can I use my building 7 days a week to reach people and share the gospel and serve and bless their communities. And so, but there's a point at which you can't grow without that building historically. And I wonder if that's going to continue to be true.
Yeah, I think the best balance, if you read in the Bible in Acts chapter 2 and then chapter 4, it very clearly states that they will gather at the temple and then at homes. And I think it's very important to keep that balance. I always try to keep the balance because in the 70s and in the early 80s, when people started focusing more on home groups, there were some people that they say, temples are not important anymore. We just we will work with home groups. But there is something at the corporate level that you cannot experience when you're at home with small groups. That corporate worship, being together with your spiritual family, I think that has such a very important value. You don't have the freedom, especially I'm Latino. We don't have the freedom of worshiping the way we like to do. We're a little Pentecost, and we need to be careful. When we have home groups, especially if you have it in an apartment or in a neighborhood where you don't have the freedom to park so many vehicles. There is always a limitation. So I think both are very important, both aspects, the church and then home groups, and they both should help each other. Like for instance, our members have to drive an average of 40 minutes every time they want to come to church. Just one way. So
you're more of a regional church.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, that means that Sundays for us, we call it celebration. It's that we celebrate, but throughout the weeks we are working, with home groups or any other activities. But they don't come like every week, or throughout the weeks.
Okay. Now, one of the things I want to make sure we talk about, because I thought it was a fascinating comment that Sam Rodriguez made, is he talks, and I've heard him say this a couple of times, is that Latinos don't fit easily into racial binaries, right? He would reject that, hey, Latinos are one big monolithic group. And so can you speak to that a little bit from your experience? And then there's another topic that he brings up a lot I want to come to.
Right. Well, I mean, you can see it in me, I'm not white, I'm not black. In that sense, I'm breaking the binary, concept, and it is so true. I
But
think
when we think of Latinos, though, a lot of people think of, okay, we talk about Latinos. Is that really a fair grouping, or is there more that is different among groups of people from different parts of the world that we lump into Latinos, or is it a fair grouping because there's enough commonality?
Latinos is fine. It is, we're comfortable when we are called Latinos or Hispanics. I think Latinos are a little more um, like casual and feel better.
Okay.
But I think when it comes to a problem is when people, and I think I don't hear it that much as I did a few years back, where people call us Mexicans or Puerto Ricans because they thought that
Everybody is.
they thought that all Latinos were Mexicans, or the only Latinos were Puerto Ricans. You know what I mean? Because they're like the biggest groups, and especially in some areas of the country, in some parts of the country. But yes, there is a diversity in among Latinos that we can identify usually, among Latinos, believe it or not, sometimes I go to a restaurant and even just the way they speak, you know what I mean? I went to this restaurant and I was like, oh, you from El Salvador, right? And then you're from Argentina. And it was, and they're like, yes, it's so true. And so yes, there is a diversity, among us.
Yeah.
But if you're grouped, as a Latino, it is fine.
Yeah, because the Cuban American experience is different than the Puerto Rican experience, is different than the Ecuador American or Costa Rican American. And so there are some distinctions there that we make a mistake. Certainly when we say all Latinos are Mexican or all Latinos are Puerto Rican.
That's right.
But it also doesn't appreciate there's a whole lot of diversity there. And so when he talks about that, he talks about it in the context of the Latino Church. Maybe that's not theologically correct term, right? Because there's only the church, right? But Latino churches or Latino leaders or Latino believers will reconcile Billy Graham's message with Martin Luther King's march. What do you understand him to be saying about that? And why are Latinos unique in being able to do that?
Wow. Look, I can speak for my own experience where it has really been a transforming, encounter with this belief. What we call it the cross of Christ, the gospel represented on the cross. In my own experience, I grew up just hearing and learning about what Samuel Rodriguez might call it the Billy Graham's gospel, the vertical. You need to reconcile with the Lord. You need to, fix your ways. You need to, even get ready for Jesus coming and everything. So that vertical relationship is like the first commandment, in the Old Testament. Love your God.
Mm-hmm.
But then, and the thing is that most of, I don't say like probably not the majority, but a good portion of Latinos is still Latino churches in Central South America. We continue living that gospel, the vertical gospel, the message of salvation. And it has taken us some journey for many of us to know that there is something else, and it's what is called the vertical aspect of the gospel, where yes, you should love God, but what about your neighbor? In which way you are manifesting God's love for those in need? And probably one of the things that it has pushed me to work with organizations like the NHCSC is because of that balance of the vertical with the horizontal. Is loving God, but also manifesting your care and love for your neighbors, for those in need. And I think that, I don't know if you have heard Samuel Rodriguez, but his testimony. But since he was like 15, he was saying that he was watching a program where he was watching Billy Graham's in I think it was in New York, in Madison Square Garden, having this huge event. And he was watching that event, and God spoke to him, and God said, like, I want you uh, to continue that mantle, of Billy Graham's. And he was like, and he was crying, and he was, praying, and he was like, oh my goodness, God is calling me to, like, continue that message of Billy Graham. And then he said that he, turned the TV, and he began to watch some of the Martin Luther King Jr. March, and then God spoke to him and said, like, I want you. He thought he was crazy, like, so you want me to do everything? Because he was very specific. I want you to also, continue his legacy. And then, he continued crying. He's like, so what do you want me to do? And then he said that as he visited churches, he began to be prophesied like multiple times. He said, like, he forgot how many times pastors or preachers, they will call him out of their seats and out of his seat, and he will say, like, come, I have a word for you. And he said, and he will confirm, like, I want you to continue the legacy of Billy Graham and Martin Luther King Jr. So he understood that his calling was to be the nexus of the vertical and the horizontal. And for some reason, he understood that Latinos, because of having that, mix in that sense, and that diversity in itself, that we can be a tool, for God to bring that reconciliation between those two, which for me, oh my goodness, it has. Imagine how much it has resonated, having that passion to serve God and seeing, like, many, and I'm sorry to say this, to put it this way, but to see the gospel preached and lived by my Anglo friends, and then see the African American churches with that emphasis on social justice. And so I have seen it, and for me to embrace both and not just either or, I think it has become like a very powerful and impactful revelation or opportunity to live out that gospel, the full gospel in that sense.
Yeah, because there are a tendency among some churches that we kind of skew one way or the other, right? We're very involved in the justice aspect of the gospel, or we're very involved in the salvific or salvation effect of the gospel. But the marrying of the two is something that what I've observed in my time in New England is, if you're not doing that justice piece, caring for the, for foster kids, caring for orphans, right, serving the widows, right, fighting human trafficking, all of those kind of, if you're not doing those things, nobody really wants to hear about Jesus anymore. And so that Billy Graham method that was so effective of just tell people about Jesus seems to not be working in our context, absent the, I have to disadvantage myself to serve you. Now suddenly you care what I have to say about Jesus.
Right. Both are so important, definitely, because, I mean, Jesus is the answer to the needs of the people, And
you almost want to shake people. Sometimes it's right there, right? It's so right, but that's not the way the gospel works. You don't shake people to do it.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah. So I mean, for me, it has turned into, a wonderful part of the journey. And in my case, it didn't start a long time ago. It started by at least being exposed to, to that presentation of the gospel, trying to understand it, try to learn it. I'd be very humble, to accept that I wasn't taught that way. And like, for instance, couple years ago, I tried to identify which churches among our Latino churches are working with the community. And I identified a church in Chelsea, Pastors Valles. They have many years working with homeless people in Chelsea. And I began by sending volunteers, to the church. Then I told my volunteers, tell the pastor that I want to meet him. I want to talk to him. And then I remember that I went to one Thanksgiving. I said, I just want to go to serve. I want to serve. And then the pastor was there, and he just said, I know you want to serve, but let's talk. And so he understood that I had some questions. I said, like, how did everything begin in your experience? And so I began to hear his story. I just wanted to learn from him. And the next thing that I did was to invite him to church, to share his experience. And then I invited to Kopani to share his experience. That's how serious I was understanding this horizontal part of the cross, And since then, it's been, oh my goodness, God has opened up doors that to the point that I think, and I expressed this to my leadership a couple of nights ago, having a meeting with my pastoral team, and I said, look, it seems that God really took it very seriously. When we prayed that we were willing to live the gospel, the vertical and the horizontal, because He had opened up doors that it seems like we're not ready, just helping a community. We are doing it with the church and with Kopani, and in that process, partnerships, helping people in need. So we're enjoying that part of the journey.
Yeah.
But I'm glad, but Charlie, if I tell you, but I'm glad that I have that strong foundation of living passionate for God.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have changed it, in that order. I think to having that foundation of that very vertical relationship with God, I think that's going to keep us the balance for whatever God has in store for us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing what God does when we're just obedient. It seems pretty simple, right?
That's right. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Well, Sergio, good. What have we not talked about that you want to touch on as we wind down? What's one more thing we need to hear from you?
I think that some people is tired to talk about the pandemic. In our case, I'm not tired to get everything that we can. The way that I see it is that every crisis, even at the personal level, I mean, you hear people when they're collapsing in some type of disease or infirmities and they are spending time in the hospital, finally they change their diet. Finally, they change their ways. So I see value on crisis, and crises are always an opportunity for us to evaluate ourselves and to we've been speaking these terms in church. It's time to reinvent ourselves, which is not easy. It's not easy. Let me give you just a tip of the way that I see things. I have always learned how to renovate, in the sense that, for instance, I noticed that when you have something new, all right, when you have something new, a new vehicle, a new apartment, new clothes, you tend to take care of those. But then after a while, you're like, and I have used vehicles of friend of mine that is like 2 years old, but they look like 15-year-old cars, really.
Yeah.
And then they come to my car and they say, like, I had a friend of mine, a pastor, and he said, like, man, I didn't know that you purchased your new car. And I said, it's been 7 years, 7 years with the same vehicle. Because my mentality is like, how can you keep things, but that you can always renew them in such a way that you love them, that you like them, The same thing with my clothes. Shiny shoes, I still have my shiny shoes. I take care of them. My clothes, I iron my clothes. to the point that every time that I go, I like it. I like it. I'm not like oh, what did I spend on this? I like everything that I have, So I apply that mentality to what can we do to always renovate ourselves. And for me, this crisis is like, what do we need to reinvent, to renovate in such a way that we continue passionate about what God has calling us to do. Just let me give you a very simple example. Well, I have many, but at least just one. A couple, like 3 weeks ago, we reopened the children's ministry. But it wasn't, we even changed the term reopening. It was the relaunching, because they told me we're not just reopening, we are relaunching. Because, I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, it was closed, now we're going to open. No. The idea was that the children, when they will come back to church finally to their classes, that they will say, like, I mean, is this the same church? It is so exciting. It is so cool, And that's the way that not only them, but their parents feel coming back to church, because, I mean, they see a whole different thing. And our children's ministry has like the description of the children's ministry is like a city. It's like a city. You have within the classroom, you have a town hall, you have a theater, you have like restaurants, you have a hospital. And the idea is that children will keep that in mind, that whatever you end up doing in life, either in a hospital or in arts or in a bank or whatever, you always bring Christ to wherever God has for you. That's the whole idea. That's the concept of the designing of the children's ministry. So by doing that, we are renovating ourselves to the point that you really like it. Because when you take care of your things, you like them. When you don't take care of your things, you don't like them. And since you don't like it, you don't take care of it. And then it's like a vicious cycle. But a virtuous cycle is like when you put on and you see the results and you like it. And because you like it, you want to invest more. So that's my mentality. And this crisis for me has been an opportunity to continue renovating to the point that I told the church last Sunday in our third service, look, I've been 32 years in ministry and I love preaching. I love preaching. I love what I do. I just want God to give me more years, preaching the gospel and having the health to do it, because I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the ride. Yes.
Man. Well, I enjoy working with you and serving with you, Sergio. So I appreciate what you do at Harvest, what you do at Kopani, what you do across New England, what you do nationally and across the world. You bless me and you bless so many others. And I'm really grateful to you for it. I'm grateful for you being with us today and giving us some insights into what God's doing in Latino churches and in the church. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate also your leadership, and it's been such a blessing, just to share, and something that we have in common is that, yes, we love sharing and spending time and creating that foundation of relationship. But I like the idea that we have that sense of calling. God has calling us to do something beautiful here in New England. And here we are. I really love living here in New England. I don't see myself going anywhere else.
I'm glad he put us in the same vineyard in which to labor.
That's right. Yes, definitely. So
and
thank you.
Thank you. Other people here with us, and he's doing something here, because you don't put people of the caliber he has put in New England for no reason. He's doing something, and it's exciting.
I totally agree with that.
And thank you to our audience for being with us. I hope you heard some things in here that convict and called you on what, and maybe pray about what is God calling you to do with this in your own life, in your own ministry, in your own community. And so thank you for being with us. And I'd like to thank the Luis Palau Association, who's dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church and impacting cities worldwide. They make this possible. And I'd like to thank the other person who makes it possible is our producer, Ashley Pitkin. So I'd like to thank Ashley as well. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like it, share it, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Apple, Amazon, and Google, and Spotify. And you can also get more information on visionnewengland.org. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.